You know that feeling when you walk into a dead mall? Empty stores, flickering lights, maybe one sad pretzel stand still hanging on? Yeah, that's not an accident. And it's not because people stopped wanting to buy stuff. It's because one company basically turned the entire retail industry upside down and left thousands of stores for dead. And the scary part? Most people saw it coming but did absolutely nothing to stop it. So here's the thing. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, malls were everything. They were where you hung out on weekends, where you got your first job, where you bought your clothes, your electronics, your everything. Shopping malls weren't just stores, they were basically community centers. Sears was the place your parents trusted. Toys R Us was where kids lost their minds every birthday. JCPenney, Kmart, Macy's, all these giants seemed totally unstoppable. But then something happened. Something that started small and grew into a monster that nobody really took seriously until it was way too late. That thing was Amazon. And I'm not just talking about some online store that sold books. I'm talking about a complete revolution in how people think about shopping, convenience, and even what a store actually is. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1994. A guy named Jeff Bezos is working at a hedge fund in New York making serious money. But he notices something. Internet usage is growing like crazy. We're talking 2,300% per year. He thinks to himself, what if I could build a business around that? So he quits his job, drives across the country with his wife, and starts an online bookstore out of his garage. That's Amazon, a garage startup selling books. Now compare that to the retail giants at the time. Sears had been around since 1893. It survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, everything. It was the most trusted name in American retail. Toys R Us was making billions. Malls were packed every single weekend. The idea that some random internet bookstore could take them all down, people would have laughed at you. But here's where the problem starts. While Bezos was obsessing over customer experience, fast shipping, and building a system that could scale, these retail giants were coasting. They thought they were too big to fail. They thought customers would always come to the mall because that's just what people did. They were wrong. Amazon didn't just sell books. It studied what people wanted. It made shopping easier. It made shipping faster. And most importantly, it didn't stop. While Sears was still printing catalogs and trying to get people to walk into stores, Amazon was building warehouses everywhere, hiring thousands of people and creating a logistics network that could deliver stuff to your door in 2 days. Then 1 day, then same day, then 2 hours. And that's the thing about disruption. It doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, it's quiet. And then suddenly it's everywhere and you can't stop it. Let's talk about what made Amazon so dangerous. First, it was the prices. Amazon didn't have to pay rent for expensive mall stores. It didn't need salespeople standing around. It just needed warehouses and a website. That meant it could sell stuff cheaper, way cheaper. So when you're standing in a Best Buy looking at a TV for $1,200, you pull out your phone, check Amazon, and see the same TV for $900. What do? You leave Best Buy and order it on Amazon. That's called showrooming, and it killed physical stores. Second, it was the selection. A physical store can only hold so much inventory, but Amazon's website, it could list millions of products. Literally anything you wanted, they either had it or could get it. You want a specific brand of coffee? Amazon has it. You need a weird adapter cable that no store carries? Amazon has it. You want a book that came out 30 years ago? Amazon has it. The mall couldn't compete with that. Third, and this is the big one, it was the convenience. People are lazy. I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean we all want things to be easy. And Amazon made shopping so stupidly easy that going to the mall started to feel like a chore. Why would you drive 20 minutes, fight for parking, walk around a huge building, wait in line, and carry heavy bags back to your car when you could just click a button on your phone and have it show up at your door 2 days later? You wouldn't. And millions of people made that same choice. But here's where it gets really interesting. Amazon didn't just win because it was cheaper and easier. It won because it kept innovating while everyone else stood still. In 2005, Amazon launched Prime. For a flat fee every year, you got free 2-day shipping on almost everything. At first, people thought it was a stupid idea. They thought Amazon would lose money. But it was genius. Because once you paid for Prime, you started using Amazon for everything. You were locked in. It became a habit. You stopped even thinking about going to the mall. Then in 2007, Amazon launched the Kindle. Suddenly, it wasn't just selling physical books, it was changing how people read. Bookstores like Borders couldn't keep up. Borders filed for bankruptcy in 2011 and shut down completely. Thousands of people lost their jobs, and Amazon just kept growing. Then Amazon Web Services happened. AWS is basically the cloud computing backbone of the internet. Amazon wasn't just a store anymore, it was a tech giant making billions from other companies using its servers. That money let Amazon do things traditional retail stores could never dream of. It could lose money on products just to gain market share. It could experiment with crazy ideas like drone delivery. It could build its own logistics network with planes and trucks and delivery drivers. It became a machine that traditional stores had no way to fight. Now let's talk about the retail giants and why they failed so badly. Sears is the perfect example. Sears was Amazon before Amazon existed. It had a massive catalog. People ordered stuff from Sears and it got delivered to their homes. Sound familiar? Sears should have been the one to dominate online shopping, but it didn't. Why? Because the people running Sears didn't believe in the internet. They were stuck in the old way of thinking. They thought stores and malls were forever. By the time they tried to build an online presence, it was too late. Amazon was already miles ahead. Sears filed for bankruptcy in 2018. It closed hundreds of stores. People who had worked there for decades lost their jobs. And it wasn't because Sears sold bad products. It was because it refused to change. Toys R Us is another tragedy. This was the store every kid dreamed about. It was massive, colorful, filled with every toy you could imagine. But Toys R Us made some huge mistakes. In 2000, it signed an exclusive deal with Amazon to be the only toy seller on Amazon's website. Sounds smart, right? Wrong. Because Amazon broke the deal and started letting other toy sellers onto the site anyway. Toys R Us sued, and they eventually won. But the damage was done. By the time Toys R Us tried to build its own online store, it was years behind. On top of that, Toys R Us was drowning in debt from a buyout by private equity firms. It couldn't invest in improvements. It couldn't compete with Amazon's prices. It filed for bankruptcy in 2017 and closed all its U.S. stores in 2018. Kids cried, parents were sad, and Amazon kept growing. Then there's JCPenney, Macy's, Kmart, all these brands that used to be everywhere. They're all either bankrupt, barely surviving, or closing stores left and right. Why? Same story. They didn't adapt fast enough. They thought the mall would last forever. They underestimated the internet. And by the time they realized what was happening, Amazon was already too powerful. But it's not just about Amazon being smart. It's also about these stores making terrible decisions. A lot of retail chains got bought out by private equity firms that loaded them up with debt, sucked out the cash, and left them to die. That's what happened to Toys R Us. That's part of what happened to Sears. They were set up to fail even before Amazon delivered the final blow. And then there's the mall itself. Malls were built for a different time. They were built when people had time to wander around and browse. But life got busier. People started working more hours. They had less free time. And when they did have time, they didn't want to spend it walking around a mall. They wanted convenience. They wanted speed. Amazon gave them that. The mall didn't. When the pandemic hit in 2020, malls shut down. Stores closed. People were stuck at home. And guess what they did? They shopped online. Amazon's sales exploded. It hired hundreds of thousands of workers just to keep up with demand. Meanwhile, stores like JCPenney and Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy during the pandemic. They couldn't survive without foot traffic. Amazon didn't need foot traffic. It thrived. Now here's the thing. Amazon didn't just kill malls. It changed everything. It changed how we think about shopping, how fast we expect things to arrive, how much we're willing to pay. It raised the bar so high that even other online stores struggle to compete. Walmart, Target, they've invested billions into their own online platforms and delivery networks just to keep up. And they're still behind. But Amazon isn't perfect. It's faced criticism for how it treats workers. Warehouse employees talk about brutal conditions, constant monitoring, impossible quotas. Delivery drivers say they barely have time for bathroom breaks. Small businesses complain that Amazon copies their products and undercuts them. There are concerns about monopoly power, about Amazon being too big, too powerful, too controlling. Some people think it should be broken up, but here's the reality. Love it or hate it, Amazon won. It looked at an industry that hadn't changed in decades and said, "We can do this better." And it did. It outworked, outthought, and out-executed every single competitor. The malls didn't fall because of bad luck. They fell because they refused to evolve. They got comfortable. They stopped innovating. And in business, if you stop moving forward, you die. So what does this mean for the future? Well, malls as we knew them are mostly done. Some are getting torn down and turned into apartments or offices. Some are being turned into weird mixed-use spaces with restaurants and entertainment instead of stores. A few are hanging on, but they're shadows of what they used to be. Physical retail isn't completely dead, but it's never going back to what it was. And Amazon, it's still growing. It's getting into healthcare, into groceries with Whole Foods, into streaming with Prime Video, into smart home devices with Alexa. It's not just a store anymore. It's a tech empire that touches almost every part of your life. And the scary part is, we let it happen. We chose convenience over everything else. We clicked that buy button knowing we were helping a giant get bigger. And most of us don't regret it because, honestly, it made life easier. But this story is a lesson. It's a lesson about what happens when you ignore change. It's a lesson about how fast things can shift. 20 years ago, the idea that malls would be dead and one online store would control everything seemed impossible. Today, it's reality. If you're running a business, any business, this should terrify you. Because somewhere out there, there's another Jeff Bezos in a garage building the thing that's going to replace you. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not willing to change, you're going to end up like Sears. You're going to end up like Toys R Us. You're going to be a case study in a video like this one about how you got crushed. The fall of the mall isn't just a story about retail. It's a story about evolution, about survival, about who adapts and who dies. Amazon adapted. The malls didn't. And now we live in a world where you can order anything you want and have it on your doorstep tomorrow. That's incredible. But it also came at a cost. Thousands of stores closed. Hundreds of thousands of jobs lost. Communities that used to gather at malls don't have that space anymore. So yeah, Amazon crushed America's retail giants. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fair, but it was inevitable. Because in business, it's not about being the biggest or the oldest. It's about being the best at giving people what they want. And Amazon figured that out before anyone else did. If there's one thing you take away from this, it's that change is always coming. Always. The question is, are you going to be the one driving it, or are you going to be the one getting run over? Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this.